Well, Neil, first of the R5 cars to be owned by a New Zealand team. How did this come about?
Really, it was, I obviously had an involvement with AP4 cars. Initially with Andrew, just more componentry wise than anything else. And then with Spencer Wynn's car, the Skoda, beginning of this year. So I've had a good look at those cars and the costs associated with them and the amount of work needed, development and the like, which is obviously always there with a new car, it has to be said. Looked at all of that and then basically looked at options in terms of buying an R5 car. I have to say I did look at options to buy a couple of years ago, but then the cars were still relatively new, still expensive. The dollar wasn't right to buy, so yeah, it was a big hurdle. Beginning of this year, I got an approach from a customer asking me again what was the possibility, what would it cost. We did the exercise again and then realised that maybe the timing was right at looking, to buy an R5. And obviously here I am today, it was right. And time will tell whether that was a good decision or not, a good business decision or not.
Well, it's not a new venture for you. You're obviously very well known in PWRC when you were running the Evos. So are you confident that this is a good, solid business?
Oh yes, no, absolutely. As you said, I've done the Mitsubishi thing for many years. I think at the height of that, we had, I don't know how many Evos we built, but we had 5 or 6 of them, in the business, and they all ran. I had a plan for the life of every car, then it had to go rah-de-rah-de-rah. And I've just applied those same principles to this car here. And yeah, look, on paper it will work. I think the advantages of what we're doing here over the alternative, which is AP4, is that if I want a customer for Rally New Zealand, for instance, I could pretty much pick the phone up and have somebody from the other side of the world here to drive the car. They know what they're getting, they know who I am, they know how we run our teams. So, that's my process, my business thought.
Well, tell us about this car. What is this car?
Well, this car came from Norway. Although I bought it out of the UK through a very good friend of mine who has run many of them, probably more than any other team in Europe. And I did ring my mate Ken when I was looking to buy a car, and he says, look, I've got this car here, it's Brindleson's out of Norway, done 11 snow rallies, a couple in Scotland, 600 kilometres of special stage, here's the price. And I thought, yep, I think that'll work for me, so we bought it. So that's what it won the Norwegian Championship last year. It's done Rally Sweden twice, and pretty much that's its life so far.
Well, on the surface it doesn't look a lot different to an AP4 car, but underneath, what are the critical differences?
I think the biggest thing is the componentry wise, they're pretty much the same. They've all got ZF gearboxes in it. This is 5-speed, not 6 like we have here. The rear diff is pretty much the same, long suspension travel, that type of thing. The difference here is that this car, or all these components, if you like, were put together by a factory team. So you have to remember that there's been millions of pounds spent on developing every part on the car, right down to the huge amount of testing that's gone in before they've released a car for sale. So that's the difference. I liken it to a baker. We've got all the ingredients here on the kitchen bench. Now we've got to get them all together for the right end result. Now we've all got the same componentry, but clearly there's quite a difference in the end result. Biggest component being the engine. Obviously, we were all working or starting or trying to work with DI, direct injection engines, and the technology is really leading edge at the moment still. And even for us here in New Zealand, we're only just this year starting to work to develop a DI engine. M Sport have been working on it for 5 years now. So they've pretty much mastered it.
Well, the engine is one of those things that I think did scare people a little about an R5 car because it has to go back to M Sport to be rebuilt. Do you see that as being a big issue?
No, I don't. There's no guarantees in life, and certainly not in motorsport, but they pretty much guarantee the engine for a couple of thousand kilometres. In reality, they'll probably do 3. But you get what you pay for there. The reason behind engines having to go back is just their IP. There's been so much money spent here to get this engine. Inside that engine is not clever. It's not clever. But the electronics and the way it's all run, that definitely is. So when you send your engine back, you've got to send your ECU with it and the like. So if you look at the cost involved in that, 2,000 kilometres on an engine here is 2 years of rallying. So a rebuild's 30 grand, so it's a couple of $1,000 an event. And to be able to, I think anyone in the championship today, without mentioning names, would be quite happy to get their 30 grand out. Because some of them unfortunately wasted a lot more than that. So, I think that's invaluable. We spend a lot of money turning up to do an event, and we don't want to go home with a DNF. So if you know that you've got an engine that's going to be good for X, Y, Z, and assuming you don't run it into anything or poke a hole in the radiator or want it's going to be good to go. So that has a value. That has a value.
We talked about these cars being very similar. When I look at the engine, there's a pop-off valve on the turbo. You're only running a 32mm restrictor. Does that mean that this engine is developing significantly less power?
It probably does on paper. Yes, the pop-off valve is an FIA controlled part. So your 1.5 bar of boost or 2.5 total above atmosphere is all you're permitted, and a 32mm restrictor is the biggest you can have compared to 34 here. And here, well, you can make as much boost as you want, or try, you can try. But of course, at the end of the day, what the FIA are doing here is they're sort of like putting some restraints on the engine builders. So there is a certain amount of reliability that has to be built in because of what you're working with. Restrictor size of the engine. Difference in power? Like I say, on paper, yes. To drive it, absolutely not. I've had the good fortune to drive several factory-built cars over the years, and the first time I drove this car, I likened it very, very much to the first time I drove Brian Green's WRC car when that arrived here. And I drove that, and I thought, well, this is impressive. This is a proper car. This car is a better car, but the difference is 98 to 2017. So you look at the development, 2-litre engine, active diffs, 1600cc engine, 32mm restrictor, so the progress is phenomenal. But everything is worked out. There's nothing that's left to chance on the car, right down to the blimmin', washers or the switches or just wherever you're seated in the car. It's just like the best running shoe you could put on. It just feels right.
Well, of course, you're not going to be driving the car. Max Bayley's going to be driving the car for the next 2 rounds. How have you assessed Max's progress since he first saw this car?
Well, look, it's no secret that I've always looked at Max, and he is a guy that has huge potential, always has. He started out with a front-wheel drive Fiesta, so I think his apprenticeship has been perfect. When he got in this car, there was nothing in there that really fazed him, well, that nothing appeared to anyway. His approach to it was he kept an open mind, but he was keen just to, not to be intimidated by the car. He has good skills. So the left-hand drive aspect of it, well, we didn't even think about it. We didn't talk about it because it's really not an issue in my book, and he sees it the same now. We had a day in the car, first up when he drove it in the forest, was a very, very slippy day, wet as hell. So he did a lot of work to keep the car on the road. So that was very good. And the second time he drove the car was hard and fast and a lot of really tight, grippy corners. And I followed him that day. Fortunately, friends had a helicopter there, and I watched him from the air, and I thought, no, we don't have a problem here. Max has adapted to the car extremely well. And I have to say that in his early comments, the first time he drove the car, he likened it very much to his little R2, his front wheel drive car, other than the fact you don't use as much lock in the corner because the front wheel drive just pushes a bit harder and you need to turn it in harder. You just halve everything. You just halve everything, stay committed, everything works.
Oh, it's interesting because M Sport have developed the Fiesta from the R1 to the R2 for a 5 to a full WRC car. It's a natural progression, isn't it, for drivers to do this step?
It is, and that's, you know, if we go back a bit further to Ben Hunt, for instance, you know, Ben came into the sport and, you know, won the scholarship in his R2 in the ST Fiesta. So his apprenticeship into this, you know, introduction to the sport was correct, I believe. Went on to win a championship in 5 years. I don't think anyone's done that in that short space of time. I won't I won't stick my neck out and say that Max will halve that, but watch the space.
Well, what expectations have you put on him for this weekend?
None whatsoever. And it wouldn't be fair of me to do that either. You know, we're simply going to provide him with a vehicle, with the backup support and everything, you know, all of our knowledge that we have here, and, you know, we're going to take all that along and give that to him. So, and we're going to help him through, you know, any little issues or problems that he may or may not have, but no expectations whatsoever. I think, you know, a nice finish, clean, will be what we'll be looking for. But I know that if Max is as good as I think he is, he'll know where he wants to be at the end of the day, and we'll just leave it at that.